And so it is really important to have that balance, because most important thing behind content creation when you're traveling is to enjoy the experience. Like I'm that's at the core of why I'm going on these trips in the first place, is to fully immerse myself into a certain culture and to be able to fully enjoy it and to fully be there, not to be thinking about every single next shot that I need to put, or like, whether I was screwing something up around my business. It's like, no, I set it up in a way for me to be able to go there, experience it, capture a few moments, and then be able to put it all into a story afterwards.
Welcome back to the Happy Positive Energy Game podcast with me, your host, Luke Annick. And I hope all you beautiful people are feeling bright and warm. And if not, that is exactly why we are here today. I've got an incredible guest for you guys. As some of you guys know, I was doing a little bit of traveling across the world, and I found myself in a bit of a unique spot in Iceland where I came up to this beautiful little natural spring, and I met this group of people. And one of the people I'm bringing on today, so I'm bringing on Jaro Chebla, also known as on his mainstream profiles, Travel with Jaro. Jaro has originally grown up in Hawaii, but has now been traveling for the past 3 years. Is that right?
Yes, about 3 years ago, got it tattooed on my arm. Was the day I decided to drop out of out of university and
Yeah,
to leave home and to pursue that full time. So yeah, it's been 3 years now.
hell yeah. And Jaro has a social media family of over 2 million followers. So, Jaro, I just want to say out of the bottom of my heart, I know you're always traveling around here, there, and everywhere. But I'm so grateful that you're on this podcast, because I feel like a lot of people listening to this want to step into traveling and want to step into, ultimate freedom and living their best life. And I feel like you've really gave yourself an opportunity to access that. So welcome on.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it, and super stoked to have met you. I feel like this is the first time that we're really tuning in together,
Uh-huh.
and it's like no wonder that we just met at this random hot spring in the middle of nowhere in Iceland. It's like, if we're not gonna meet there, like, where are we gonna meet? We're either gonna be on in
Yeah.
the middle of the desert, on the moon, or like somewhere else. So yeah, super stoked that we were able to connect, and excited to share this time with you.
Yeah, dude, I'm excited to learn about you way more deeper, and I'm sure people are as well. So I think it's going to be really important, not only for me, but for the audience. Like, where were you before you decided to venture off and travel?
Yeah, so I mean that definitely leads into like the longer story. Hey, I'm originally from the Czech Republic, and when I was about 5 years old, my family wanted to move over from the Czech Republic all the way across the world to Hawaii, and we're five and we only speak Czech, and we're like, what is going on? I don't want to move to Hawaii, and we were just so scared, and we make it over there, and I spent about 16 years in Hawaii, and it's just grown me into a totally different person. Whereas like growing up in the city in Prague in the Czech Republic, I I can't even imagine like what sort of person I'd be as compared to who I was growing up in Hawaii and having constantly being surrounded by nature, spending so much time in the ocean, surfing in the outdoors and whatnot. Um, but fast forward a few more years, I met a girl that I teenage fell in love with, and I moved out to Oregon for this girl and spent a semester going to a Christian university. This was I was in school for 2.5 years at the
Mhm.
time already after high school. So 2.5 years of college/university. And yeah, so I spent some time in Oregon, and then she wasn't able to afford to go to that school anymore, so I wasn't going to go to that school without her. I fell in love with this girl. Why would I stay at this like small
Mhm.
conservative Christian university without her around? So I go and I moved with her over to Vancouver, Canada. I spent about 3 to 4 months there before taking the big leap.
Okay, I hear that. So with taking the big leap, I appreciate you're a content creator full time now. So were you content creating before you decided to travel, or was it just like an initial documenting process and then it just grew into the beast that it is now?
So um, I began shooting content when I was about 12 years old. I picked up a GoPro and started shooting surf photography. So I'd wake up at 5 in the morning every single morning to go and shoot photos and videos at the beach, which I'd later share with my audience. So when I was about 16 years old, my dad helped me to invest in a water housing for an actual camera, which was like a couple $1,000s at the time. This was like a big deal, and so I was like determined to make it in surf photography, and chipped away at it for years and years. And there really wasn't as much opportunity in growing on social media at that time, unless you already had a following base. It's like the days of organic reach were totally gone at that point. And that was up until TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and all of that came along. Whereas like now you could grow faster than ever. Like you could blow up and quit your job overnight. Even it's absolutely wild. So yeah, I did that for a bit, and I feel like I was constantly going back and forth between trying to make a ton of money or following my passions. And so for the longest time, I would just try to hustle up and start a bunch of different other businesses that, I had fun with like the business side of things, but it's not something that I was super, super passionate about. So before I really grew my social following and committed to content creation full time, I was trying to make I was trying to make it in drop shipping for about a year, and it was just like hustling in the drop shipping game. I was determined to have a ton of money, a bunch of babes, traveling the world full time, and to have millions of dollars in drop shipping. And soon found out that that was something that was never going to make me happy. And I had a software engineer from Silicon Valley. Well, man, there's so many crazy stories that I'm skipping over that I hope to dive into. But basically, we were in New Zealand. That was the first place that I went to after I had left home 3 years ago, and I met a group of people. One of them had been a part of a sailing group on Facebook, and he was looking for a boat to sail on. His name was Chris. And then I also had my friend Luke, who was a software engineer from Silicon Valley, and he was just traveling around working on his computer and all this stuff. And I had my new girlfriend, Mash, who I started dating after 5 months of me leaving home. And one of them asks us if we were interested in going with him and sailing from New Zealand to Fiji, which would be a 7-day crossing. And we had never sailed in our lives. We're like, what the fuck? And we were like, what is going on? And we had some other trips planned at that time, and decided to make a 24-hour decision in sailing to Fiji. So we had to pack all of our things up the next day and leave. So now we're in some part of New Zealand training. We're supposed to be training for 1 week, and then we were supposed to be sailing from New Zealand to Fiji. And that ended up being like 2 months of living on the boat in New Zealand because they couldn't get their papers on in time. And anyway, that's kind of going off topic a little bit. But when I was on that boat, Luke was with me, the software engineer, and I kept talking about how I wanted to create content at that time. And it was always, I'm going to create it when I get to this place, and when I get to that place, and when I get to that place. I always had Bali, Indonesia as like the place in my mind where I was going to make it with my content creation. Even though I wasn't even working on content creation, I was just trying to do every other little thing to control the financial situation at the time. So it was a bit hard to take that leap. At the time I was making about $1,200 a month, which was plenty of money to be traveling with, as like backpacking with. And Luke looks at me as we were stepping onto the boat, because this was like the perfect thing to document. It's like we're about to like experience something crazy, and he's like, bro, you've just been like talking about it all this time. Why don't you just start today? And then it just hit me smack in the face at that moment in my life. It's like, you're right. I'm never actually going to start what it is that I'm excited about until I just start. And today is the perfect day to start. So a lot of my content actually preaches on that as well. Like the last couple of posts I put up have gone off that topic of just starting today. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just taking that little step forward in the direction of your passions.
Right. It is kind of like that. I think. Like I can definitely relate. Like the first coach that I ever had, like I was watching his content for like 8 months, and I was like, I'm gonna hire this guy. I'm gonna hire this guy. I'm gonna hire this guy. Until like there was that pivotal moment where it was like, dude, just hire the dude. Like, just hire him. Like, come on. And yeah, I think it's such a beautiful space to. So since that first moment of you creating content, what is the difference between Jaro then and Jaro now?
So I chipped away at it. I That was when I really started hammering down on TikTok. Like what I was most excited about at the end of the day was filmmaking. I wanted to be a filmmaker. So I was doing both because I saw this massive opportunity in growing on TikTok at the time 3 years ago. And then there was, wait, this was, no, that wasn't 3 years ago. This was about 2 years ago now, 2.5 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, and I chipped away at that for 7 months and had my first massive breakthrough on TikTok where, dude, my account grew from 150,000 followers to 650,000 followers within literally 5 days. Like it was insane how quickly it grew at the time. And filmmaking had always been like something on the back of my mind that I had wanted to pursue. That was like full direct alignment with my passions. But it's also something that's a little harder to organically grow. So me taking a step closer in that direction was me finally pursuing content creation full time too, and being able to turn that into a living. And now that I have that as my living, it allows me to travel while documenting with my actual camera at the same time. So I have a couple of other projects going on in the background right now that most people don't see, which would be like my cinematic passion led projects. Yeah. Yeah, I could dive a little more into about like what I've been working on lately.
Yeah, so I think it would be really great to share because I think a lot of people think, oh, like I have to do this one thing and that has to be the thing that I'm doing. But actually it's like, hey, like I've got this social media family that's grown up beautifully from all of this like short form content that I've put out. But actually like the underlying passion is the filmmaking, and you've actually been able to achieve both by doing both, right? And I'm curious, do you think the blowing up on the short form content has helped benefit you stepping into the filmmaking side of things?
Massively, because it's, yeah, in a sense content creation is, I am creating like mini films, right? And um, it has completely grown me as a person where I've been able to connect with people from all over the world. Like it's really stretched me outside of my comfort zone. And there were so many like scary things that came with committing to pursuing content creation full
Like what?
time, such as connecting with people. Like when I was working in the background on my business, like I was just so happy to be doing all of this stuff in like the background. But like growing up, I was actually like a super shy, like pretty anxious person. All I wanted to do was like connect with people and to be able to fully experience life with others. Um, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that you're grown with. It's like traveling full time, you're left by yourself for the most part at the end of every day, unless you settle down into a community, which I have here and there. You are literally just, you know, in your own bubble at the end of every day, forced to sit down with yourself. You really can't run away from your own feelings and stuff like that. Like they're so you're so what's the word for when something looks at you directly and you feel very,
Like you're kind of like avoidant towards like the things that come up for you, but like a lot is coming up because ultimately you're by yourself, right? So I'm trying to think of the word. I can't think of a word other than avoidant, but I understand what that feels like. Like
I
that's
mean,
what I felt when I traveled.
mhm.
I felt like I'm seeing all these amazing things and I'm seeing all these amazing people, but when I get to the end of the day, it's just me. There's nobody there.
Yeah, yeah, and it totally could be like I'm definitely more of the anxious and less avoidant person in like a relationship dynamic, for example. But like I'm not one to try to avoid what I'm feeling, but try to
Hmm.
dive more into it almost too much sometimes.
Hmm.
But a lot of people see travel as escapism,
Hmm.
and for the most part, when people view it as like a weekend, people wait for the weekend to go and party their faces off, or to finally go on something to try to escape from like the other 5 days of the week. Whereas like travel, it's like you finally have a couple weeks out of the year, or a few weeks out of the year, where you're just traveling somewhere and you don't care about anything at all. So you are essentially like, a lot of the times you are escaping from the reality you've got waiting back for you back at home. But when you're traveling full time, like there's no running away from that. I mean, you totally can, but you're quickly gonna find out that it's like nearly impossible to run away from that stuff traveling full time, because it's almost like a sensory overload, and you just hit this point of burnout where you just want to go inward and figure these things out by yourself. So the last 3 years have completely stretched me
Hmm.
as as a person, and I've
Hmm.
gone through a couple of different burnouts. For example, last year I didn't shoot content for 4 5 months,
Hmm.
and it was just kind of stressful because it was my job now.
Hmm.
And I was just working on like the paid projects that I had going on, and luckily that was able to last me the few months as I dove in and did all of the personal work on myself at the time.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of people say like follow your passion, follow your purpose type thing, and I'm a huge advocate for it. But you can almost get so pulled into it that it's like, okay, I'm all in. Like this is all in. You go so all in that you actually lose a part of yourself. Like and like I think that's all about like the different identities that you become along this road, right? Jaro at the start versus Jaro now is completely different. But sometimes like you get so lost that it's like, yo, I'm burnt. Like I need some time to actually figure out what I am doing and who I am right now.
Yeah. And I love these conversations, and I love the podcasts that we often go on, because it's like at the end of the day, a lot of the conversations lead to the same conversation of understanding who you are and your
Mhm.
needs, desires, honoring all sides of yourself. Like there's so much to learn and
Yeah.
to pick up on. It's beautiful.
Have you found that there's some like best practices to have when you're looking to look after yourself whilst traveling, whilst you're jumping from place to place to place? Obviously, you've got the aspect of like sleep and possible jet lag as well. I don't know how you've overcome that, or if you just aren't phased by it now that you keep traveling, or like how does that all work?
Yeah, honestly, you start to see life as just having its seasons, especially when I reached that place of burnout last year, where I didn't do much for 4 or 5 months apart from surf and look at myself, honestly. And what I've come to understand is that not every day is going to be the exact same as the other one, especially when you're like traveling all the time. And like I'm just thinking back on like hustle culture, where
Hmm.
people look at you and they tell you to like sleep less and to like do all these things, which are actually deteriorating your health, because you're so obsessed with this one thing that just seems so out of reach. And then you finally get there and you feel empty anyway. And
Hmm.
so yeah, like those key health things have been super important for me, such as getting you know sometimes as low as like 6 hours, but like oftentimes 7 or 8 hours of sleep a day. I I'm actually a yin yoga instructor, so I like to do yoga every day when I can. Physical
Yeah.
exercise is so important. If I could spend 30 minutes outside just walking and listening to a book every day, and that's so calming for my mind before diving into like work, content creation, and stuff like that. Like, yeah, it's so
Hmm.
passion driven, but it's also like it does take a lot of work too. So I really want to set myself up for success in that. And
Right.
I've yeah, like over the last couple of years, like I know when I'm close to a burnout. Like I know when I'm
Hmm.
nearing that, and sometimes it feels like I'm kind of like riding that line
Hmm.
of of what that would look like, and just having more balance in my life.
Mm. How do you kind of find that balance of creation and exploration? Because like I feel like I don't know, for me, like for exploration, like for example, and maybe this is just because it was Reykjavik and it's really small, but like after about like 3, 4 hours of Reykjavik, I was like, okay, I'm done now. Like I'm gonna go to work. I enjoy my work so much that like, I'm
Yeah.
happy to do it. But like, how do you find that balance? Is there like a schedule you lean into, or is it like, hey, like this is going to be the flow for like this next week? Like, if I'm going to be in the next destination, do you plan things, or like, how do you flow with it?
Uh, yeah, so it's actually, I mean, every single travel plan is totally uniquely different. And I've tried to focus on the things that are most important in my business. So it's like I'm not going to go back and I'm not going to, put hours of time into putting stories on Instagram because I know those aren't as effective towards my audience. Like if
Mm,
I'm going to do any actual work during a trip, it's going to be to focus on the most important things, such as, creating TikToks or Reels and stuff like that. Um,
mm,
and so it is really important to have that balance, because most important thing behind content creation when you're traveling is to enjoy the experience. Like I'm that's at the core of why I'm going on these trips in the first place, is to fully immerse myself into a certain culture and to be able to fully enjoy it and to fully be there, not to be thinking about every single next shot that I need to put, or like, whether I was screwing something up around my business. It's like, no, I've set it up in a way for me to be able to go there, experience it, capture a few moments, and then be able to put it all into a story afterwards.
mm,
So I don't actually do a ton of work during my trips, depending on how much time I have on the trips. But for example, when we were in Iceland, we were I mean, Iceland's such an expensive place, and if you're only there for 10 days, you want to see every part of it, and
yeah.
that's what our crew did out there. So I was hardly working. It's like the most we did was transfer footage to each other during that trip. And then I
Mm,
came back here, and it was like, okay, now I have my time to settle down. So I'm gonna be pumping out all this stuff, because there's not much to do, at your grandma's house apart from look at reindeer outside of the window and
mhm.
and spend a bunch of time working on content.
Uh, yeah. So you're traveling for like a decent block of time, and then you'll just kind of somewhat to the word, and I'm going to use the word grind, but like you'll just like, be like, okay, I'm locking in. It's time for like a bunch of content, and then that's kind of like pre-programmed and pre-planned for like the next X amount of time.
Like, for example, when I'm at like my grandma's house.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like I have a number of things that I just try to try to reach. I feel like my focus is constantly shifting, because like algorithms and stuff like
Mm,
that change on a monthly basis. When you're a part of the system in that way, you constantly have to pay attention to it and make sure you're putting out content that not only aligns with your audience, but will also do well online, like the stories that you're sharing online.
mhm,
I try to plan really far in advance for
mhm,
when I have those trips, because I'm not going to go cold turkey on the content that I'm putting out on Instagram and TikTok and whatnot. If you were to go into my TikTok right now, like I have 65 drafts
mhm,
of posts that are ready to be posted right now, and I
mhm,
post 2 to 3 times a day. So that's about a month or month and a half of
mhm,
posts that I have ready. If I were to go on a big trip and I couldn't spend a lot of time
mhm,
on that side of work.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I'm curious, real quick, as like a quick question, like how do you find is the quickest way for you to create such great content? Because like I think there's travel. there's some like travel blog stuff that I've seen where they like attach other quotes to like their content. Then there's yours, which is like a full blown story where like you're actually like led through it, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. And you managed to do it in such a short period of time. Like I think you really nailed it down. So like, how do you do that so quickly?
Thank you so much. And I've spent a lot of time focusing on building my team over the last few months. I realized that I couldn't really do a lot of this stuff on my own. And at the end of the day, I just want to focus on filming the content and at most editing the content and then having somebody else do all the other work of my business. So I
Totally.
went and I hired somebody that takes care of all of the subtitles on my videos. That was huge because now I'm not spending hours of my day just creating subtitles for the words that are coming out of my mouth. I also have an assistant now who does all of my brand outreach and takes care of like the back end things of my business. So
Hmm.
creating a really strong team around the brand has been super
Hmm.
beneficial and being able to put things out
Hmm.
in a faster way. So I'm hoping to automate as much as I can because at the end of the day, I just want to do what I'm passionate about. And if you could afford it, if you could put that, you know, additional 20% of your income or whatever you're earning into delegating some sort of task, it's like you'll find out that the return on that is so much bigger, as well as your mental health. Because now I'm
Right.
not getting burnt out trying to finish everything on my own. Like I'm putting out content that I'm actually excited about, and then
Hmm.
I have somebody else do something that they're excited about doing,
Right.
you know, and
Right.
then we all are just a little more effective with our time. So that's been huge. If you do look at a lot of my content, a lot of it is repurposed
Hmm.
content because I want to be putting things out at such a rapid pace. I
Hmm.
often put out content that includes a lot of the same clips that I've used in the past just because I think that they would match this next piece.
Hmm.
Although the stories vary from piece to piece, I tend to use a lot of the same clips because
Hmm.
I find that they could still target the person that I'm trying to reach and be able to deliver the message that I'm trying to share with them.
Right. I hear that. And I think it is such a, like, I think there are definitely some people that speak out there that like, it's like, hey, you don't have to grind initially. And I think like whenever you're doing a startup, like there is some grind, like where you do wear like 30 different hats. But like once you find that flow, once you get the, like it's been a bit of like a model for this month has been like repeatable systems. And then you like leverage that out to other people. It actually allows you to live your life. Like I wouldn't have been able to travel and make what I made this year because the last year I tried to do that, I went into 10K of credit card debt. So like, like I wouldn't have been able to do it, and that was the first time I ever hired somebody, and it was a mess. But I think I think like it's good to good to show like okay, like yeah, you started like the initial content creation 3 years ago, but like it's taken 3 years to get to a point where it's like, hey, like I can actually leverage these things now. Like it wasn't just like a jump straight away.
No, and I think that's a lot of what I hear you saying is that you're gradually slipping into these things in your life, and you're gradually building a team, and you're gradually becoming this new person. And yeah, it's all gradual as you learn more and more. Like we're all just learning more
Hmm.
each and every day. And what you said with giving up one part of yourself to become this completely new person, it's like that's totally impossible. Like you have to live it
Hmm.
to be that person. You have to start those businesses and learn about those aspects of your businesses. Hey, like correct me if I'm wrong or if you had anything to touch on with that. It's like you really have to experience it to be able to put that together.
Yeah.
Whereas like if my social media accounts were taken away from me today, like I would make it all back within a few months
Right.
because of the experience and the knowledge that you've grown, that it's taking you to this place that you're at now. Like people tend to think that things just happen overnight, but it is also gradual.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hey,
What would you say is like your three best tips towards somebody who's looking to start working online slash content creating and traveling at the same time?
yeah, to so content creation or working remotely more
I
so. is your
What
question.
do you feel like you could speak more to here?
Definitely. I mean, I could touch on both, but I know that most people would probably be interested in working remotely and being able to
Mm,
travel at the same time. So my biggest tips on that would be to have a decent game plan for when you're leaving. It's like, when I first left home, it's not like I left with $0 in my bank account. Although you could go and do that, you could just go and spend money on a flight, hitchhike around a country, sleep in a tent, and beg people for food. Like you could go and travel that way, and it's totally possible. But if you want to do it and not go insane,
yeah.
you definitely want to have a decent game plan. You want to make sure that you have some sort of money coming in every month. And
Mm,
if not, maybe you leave with $7,000, and now you're going to spend the next few months of budget travel and trying to pick up on remote work.
mm,
Um, there's ways of minimizing costs in every country that you go to. A lot of programs that I used to use would be programs such as Workaway or World Packers that allow you to uh, work in a different country, and you're doing more laborious work such as farm work, or there was times where I was like scraping paint off of walls and like just doing all of these weird odd
right.
jobs, but no honorable jobs.
Uh-huh.
um, and yeah, so there's a number of things that you could do to minimize costs. Obviously, you do things like not eat out every
Mm,
day. You just go and cook your own meals. So yeah, um, biggest like yeah. So tips would be to have a decent,
game
you
plan.
know, a decent game plan
Yeah.
to minimize costs when you're traveling,
Hmm.
and to be very resourceful. It's like when you leave, just about anything you could want or need is basically figured out for you online.
Hmm.
If you have some sort of question, or if you're trying to make new friends or whatever it is, like there are so many different apps and resources and things that you could do in connecting with other people
Hmm.
and just finding answers to your questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
dude.
is that helpful for anyone listening?
For sure. So I've got a bit of a curiosity question because I mean, obviously, like there's a lot of stories that you have, but I'm curious what the I'm like, oh, where do I go with this question? Like, there's so many different things I could answer. So I'm like, what do you feel was the most transformational experience, if there was one, and where were you and why?
Let's see. I don't know about how transformational this experience would be. I thought you were gonna ask me about like what the craziest
I was
thing
tempted to
that
say
I've
craziest, but I think like I was gonna lean in with transformation. But I feel like even
trans.
crazy ones are transformational. So feel like if you're leaning into that, lean into that.
Yeah, I'll touch on two experiences, and I'm gonna be very open about it. I The most transformational experiences that I had um, was when I hit my burnout last year. I'd consider that a massively transformational experience, was because I basically met this one famous YouTuber, and I was like, oh my gosh, I could like hang out with this guy and learn so much from this guy and all this stuff. And he lived this totally different lifestyle from what I was really wanting and the sort of stability
Mhm.
that I was looking for at that time. So I just started partying, 4 or 5 days a week, and just started living so opposite as to who I was and what I desired during that time,
Mhm.
because I thought like I was just doing the best I could, right? Like I thought that I desired that sort of lifestyle
Mhm.
during that time. So I went for it and I did. And soon found out that that was like definitely not what was for me at that time. Yeah,
Mhm.
hit my big burnout, and that was when I went really inward and started doing a lot of the personal work on myself. So this was like a few month long transformation. Like
Mhm.
there was no like one point that I like transformed in,
Mhm.
but probably the most condensed transformation that I had was during my yin yoga course.
Hmm.
in Bali, um, where we just did so many different exercises and integrated so much that we were able to apply to every day. But people were having emotional breakdowns
Yeah.
during this yin yoga course the whole time. Have you ever done yoga? Like, do you
I've
do a
yeah,
bit of yoga?
I do yoga like to like a minor degree, but it's not like I'm going to like yoga classes and going for like a full experience. Like I haven't been to like a yoga retreat or something like that yet.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, there's so many different ways of getting to know yourself and just sitting still, right? You start to learn more about yourself when you find moments of stillness, instead of constantly having um, what's the word, stimulants being shoved into your face every day,
Right.
whether it be the same people or experiences or whatever it is. That's what escapism, would be. But escapism could even just be in like day to day life. But once you finally find that time to sit with yourself, you learn the most about yourself. And so there's a number of different ways of doing that. People do meditation, people do yoga, some do plant medicine to get to know
Hmm.
themselves. um, and uh, probably the biggest. So I have had a bit of experience with plant medicine
Hmm.
as well. Am I allowed to share an
Dude,
experience?
share the
Yeah. Okay.
experience, please do.
Yeah. Yeah. So once every few months, I would go and take psilocybin by myself and
Uh-huh.
just basically locked. So not locked, but just like closed into a room. I'd have my food and I'd have all this stuff ready. I'd get my incense. I'd clear the space of my entire room,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I'd go and take the psilocybin, and I'd basically just have my journal and pen ready, and I'd be listening to people like Ram Dass, Alan Watts, and then some other philosophers, just trying to dive really, really deeply into my mind and who I was as a person. Spent like so much time just like looking at myself in the mirror and really
Hmm.
trying to see who I was on a soul level and asking
Hmm.
those sorts of questions out of my life. Um, and I haven't taken those. I haven't taken psilocybin in like 6 to 9 months now, so
Hmm.
it, not addictive at all. And
Hmm.
then in this last February, I sat with my first ayahuasca ceremony, which
Wow.
yeah, which was massively transformational, but very comparable to like when I would take psilocybin by myself and
Interesting.
intentionally dive into those questions.
Right. I hear you. Yeah, because I did a. This was probably the first time I'm talking about it on the podcast. Oh well. Like everybody
Give it to us,
for
Luke.
a while has been like, Luke has been through some wild shit. So, yeah, no, psilocybin, like I took a, like my friend was like, hey, like we're gonna do this psilocybin trip while we're here in Toronto, and we're just gonna spend the day. And I'd done it maybe 2 or 3 times before, but I just watched TV. Like it wasn't like an inward journey; it was just more avoidance. And
Yeah.
it was like the day before, and she was like, "Oh yeah, like we're gonna be blindfolded." By the way, I was like, "Whoa!" Like she was like, "Yeah, you're gonna go through some stuff." I was like, "Okay." So we go to this medicine woman's like house, like a full shaman lady. She used to be like a massage therapist, and then just kind of like started like leveling up. And some people might be listening and be like, "Oh, like oh, like drugs and all that stuff." But like, look at it as like what 10,000 years ago we all had like shamans and like these ancient people that we went to, and like how old are mushrooms? Like old. So like people have been doing this for a long time. Like there's definitely some like controversy around like the original depictions of God and religion coming from psilocybin trips, and I definitely would somewhat fall into that. But anyhow, we start doing this. We go to this shaman lady's house, and she starts doing the incense, and there's like three of us. And then we take it in this like little drink, and then she just like lies us down on this like bed, and like you're blindfolded, and she's there like banging like drums and like rubbing your face and stuff, like in a nice way, in a nice way. And dude, I was seeing some stuff. Like there was just like this point where like there's a few points, but there was this point where she was like, "Hey, you've got to surrender. You've just got to like let go. Like your ego is going to try and keep you safe, the same as you would getting out of your comfort zone with any kind of normal experience." but like there's this point where like I can see my like ribs in this kind of like, should we say like, I'm gonna call it hell, and I could see my ribs, and I could like, I was like in this experience, and then this like flowing river to the right, and my body was like, I don't want to go in it. I don't want to go in it. And I was like, I feel like I'm being like kept in my comfort zone right now. And I was like, Luke, just surrender, just surrender, surrender. I want to go down the river. I don't want to stay like in this protected like comfort zone rib side of things. And I flowed into the river. Then when I flowed into the river, like I end up like seeing Elon Musk, like Jeff Bezos, and like all of like these like people that like I'd somewhat look up to in the entrepreneurial space, and they're all going towards this like light. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this is wild. Like I was crying a lot. Like it was really intense. But then since I've had that, I think my overall well-being since that experience has been the best that it's ever been, for an extended period of time. And I know there's a lot of research that backs it up, but it's amazing how like we can go inward. And I like that you really embodied a lot of like philosophers so that you could go inward. Like Alan Watts is some deep stuff if you haven't listened to it. So yeah, I think it's a fun experience to go in. I would definitely recommend. Like I don't know about you.
A fun experience, and also like think about all the other garbage that people are feeding us. I mean, we
Right.
could we could we could totally dive into, the things that we're taught in growing up in a traditional society, and my only bit of advice around that would be to question everything.
Hmm.
And it's not like I'm hopping on here and telling people to go and try plant medicine. It's like you figure things out for yourself, and you find your own path, and you journey on your own and see what's right, what's wrong, question everything. Like, where do you fit in? Where do you fit into that? Like, and
Hmm.
um, yeah, like obviously there are so many other ways of also getting to know yourself, but that plant medicine in particular has been a pretty fun, controversial topic to dive into over the last year or year and a half. And it's
Mm.
it's not it's not like we take it super often, but it's like when you do take these things, with great power comes great responsibility, and you take it with great intention and care, and instead of just taking things recreationally,
Mm. Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a definite intention difference when you're intentional versus just avoidant, which was like, I mean, a lot of people, right, growing up, you're just throwing substances into yourself because you think, like, oh, I'm just having fun, but it's really not fun.
Yeah,
Not really.
yeah.
So, why do you think that everybody should give themselves an opportunity to go and travel?
Let's see. So I wouldn't say that everyone has to leave and travel the world full time.
Hmm.
I think that people should give themselves the opportunity to see something other than what they were brought up in. Kind of goes back into that thing of like questioning, and
Hmm.
they call it finding yourself for a reason. It's kind of like finding your truth, right? You travel and you get to know all these different cultures in the world, and they're all so different from what
Hmm.
you've grown up to know. And if you, for example, when you travel to like a third world country, but you grew up in a Western society, it's like a
Hmm.
big blow up in your face, and it just like really humbles you to another level, and makes you appreciate all of the things that you have day to day. Because you could go to Africa and see a little kid running around in the dirt with fucking nothing, and
Hmm.
he's having the time of his life, and
Hmm.
here we are in like Western society, and you find the things that we complain about from day to day. And I think those going to third world countries, for example, like you really see like what is important to those people. So exposing yourself to traveling and understanding other cultures. It doesn't have to be a third world country. It could just be other cultures. It helps you think differently. It helps you see something new. It helps you question more, and then in return understand yourself better.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful light. I think there was a point in my travel when I was 16 in Ecuador. It was the first time I'd ever sort of traveled somewhat. I was out there for 2 weeks, and I was like driving through. We were driving out of the city, and I'm like seeing people like live under the ground with like metal corrugated sheets over the top, and I was just like, wow, wow. Like I didn't even consider people lived like that, but people do, and they're still
Yeah.
smiling, they're still happy, like they're still like loving their family. They don't have everything that we necessarily have, but does that make them indifferent in terms of their happiness? I don't think so. And I think sometimes with Western society, it's almost like there's nothing is ever enough, and like people have access to socials, but like if we were without Facebook and Instagram and TikTok side of things, even though yeah, like from an income standpoint for like me and you, it might be a little bit more challenging. I think for the general public who don't use it for an income purpose, I think it would actually benefit them more. I don't know about your thoughts around that.
Wait, could you say that one more time?
Yeah, so
The
for me and you, we
Mhm.
use the purpose of online media for our income and like sense of side of that. But like for the general public, if those social media platforms were taken away, it might actually benefit them a little bit more mentally, if as long as their work wasn't tied into the online space, which I mean, we're feeling pretty challenged with that right now. But I don't know if it would be a better benefit or a discount for them to somewhat lose that, to put them in that space of where the third world countries are, and they don't have access to those things, and they're still able to be happy and have a family and live like a more traditional happiness space. I don't know. What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think that depending on who you are and the way that you grew up, it also really impacts the type of content that you consume online.
Mm,
So you could be really into looking at motivational videos or things that like push you and consume content that actually motivates you in one way or another. Or you could just be entertaining yourself and just continuously trying to simulate yourself to maybe avoid how you're feeling in that
mhm,
moment. So now you're sitting on your phone for 4 or 5 hours just scrolling through TikToks that you don't even care, and they're not like inspiring you or anything at all. Like they're not bringing you any
mhm,
additional value. So I feel like it really depends on who's consuming the content and what they've been through
mhm.
in the past. But in general, if we were to remove that stuff from society, I think it brings so much good to the world as well as like so much destruction. And yeah, we constantly
Mm,
have this feeling of like not not having enough. And
mm,
I just really encourage people to look at that and to see where that stuff is coming from.
mhm.
But like not everyone will. So is it impacting a lot? Like would that side of society be better without social media when
Right.
they're not asking those questions? Maybe, maybe
Mhm,
life would be a bit simpler and they would enjoy the things that they've got right in front of them. And it
mhm.
also brings this crazy amount of opportunity for people. And a lot of like the smaller countries as well, I know they have projects going on in like the crypto space and stuff like that, for example, where they are where people in I don't exactly know what the projects are about, but I've heard that they've been doing some good things in like the third world countries who have had like a better opportunity and having more of an income than without it. So depends on who it is, but yeah, it also gives you such an opportunity to provide people with a positive message and
Mhm,
mission, and
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
so powerful.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that for sure, dude. So, last question is, and I said I know I told you before that I've got a second tradition, and it actually really flows into some of the things that you've already said. So, way back when I was going through my challenges and I started first listening to podcasts, I was listening to a podcast, and I've been listening to it for maybe 4 or 5 months. And the dude was like, "Hey, like I was working in construction, 7 to 5. I remember being on the building site on this Wednesday, and he was like, "Hey, like if you don't like your fucking life, like change it. And on that same day, like called up an events manager I knew, like begged him to like give me a job, and then like left work that same day. So I'm curious for you, like to maybe a younger version of yourself or somebody who's listening now, who may be on the fence about starting today, like you talked about, and getting on board with a project or just trying out a new idea or giving something like a real strong go. What would you say to that person, or what would you like to spread in terms of your message towards that person who's on the fence and is not sure if they're ready, but is still on the fence? Like, what would you say to that person?
Oh man. That's a good one. Because obviously you could take that to so many different levels. The question that, the cheesy question that I like to ask everyone is like, yeah, like what if today was all we had left?
Mhm.
If today was all we had left, like how would you live your life? Would you be doing anything differently? For you, that kind of struck a match. It was almost like asking you, like, dude, if you don't like your fucking life, then why don't you just leave this job you went and you left, and we're just
Mhm.
like on this mission to, or on this pursuit of finding happiness elsewhere. And I think people just get so comfortable in where they're at. It's really I feel like it definitely depend on who you're talking to as
Mhm.
well. Yeah, I can't find a direct answer for you
Mm. Mm.
in
Yeah.
that.
And I think sometimes, like, even just that question, it lands pretty hard.
Yeah.
Like, I know for me, it was when I had that realization at that time, it was like, yeah, I mean, like, I'm not happy. And then another friend asked me, like, 2 weeks later, he was like, oh, what? So, like, no, it was like 2 weeks before this. He was like, so what, are you going to be a laborer for the rest of your life? And then I had that statement to kind of push me over the edge. And I was like, "Pff." But it started with a question, right? So the question would be from Jaro is like, if your life ended today, like, would you be happy? Like, somewhat an embodiment of that question, right?
Yeah. So I mean, you know what? I don't feel like I'm at that place
Hmm.
with myself yet to be able to say that if I died right now, I'd be fully liberated and able to pass on to whatever comes next.
Mm.
And that really struck me so I was getting my skydiving license a couple
Mm.
of months ago now. I was in Spain, and there was a 2 week thing. And my first jump. Have you ever been skydiving before?
Dude, I haven't. I'm probably gonna get some stuff sorted just after Christmas, to be honest. But yeah.
Dude, so I start my license. This was something that I wanted to do for such a long time. And my first jump, I go up there with my instructor. The whole first day we're learning, we're in class, getting ready. My first jump, we get up into the plane, and now we're taking off, and I'm just sitting there because I'm supposed to walk us through the entire procedure and then pull the parachute while this guy is strapped to my back, making
Hmm.
sure that we're okay in the air.
Hmm.
And so it's already uncomfortable having a man that's 2 times my size strapped to me, and now I'm supposed to be doing everything to save us from plummeting into the earth.
Hmm.
And so it comes down to it. We jump out of the plane. I walk us through all the different procedures in the sky, and we're just like leveling out. And now we're cruising down and dropping at such a rapid pace. And as soon as we got to 4,000 meters, I'm supposed to check the altitude meter. And yeah, I got to 4,000. So I waved off, and I went and I pulled my parachute and I chucked it out. First tandem jump, we look up and he goes, "Fuck, there's a line twist." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." So I look up, all of our lines are twisted into one. And
Hmm.
I'm crapping myself, right? This is my first jump, and we're still coming down at a really fast pace. And so we're trying to kick out of it. This guy's screaming at me. And anyway, we go down a bit further. He's like, we're gonna have to. Well, as we were coming down in that first shoe, I looked at the ground and I was like, I'm not ready to die. Like
Hmm.
I don't feel ready to die. And um, for somebody that is liberated of that, like I wonder how they would respond to a situation like that. Is like, are people actually ready to pass, or are they not? Personally, I don't feel like I've gotten to that place with myself to be able to say that I've like fully liberated myself of that.
Mm.
But when I look back at my life, I have no regrets for anything that I've lived,
Hmm.
um, and continue to push myself in the ways that I want to be pushing. What would your take on that be?
Mm. Yeah, I've got
Like,
not the same experience, but I've got another near death experience that I can definitely speak to that gave me a lesson. So, long story short, I was camping with some friends and we were in this space in Cornwall and we were like, hey, the lighthouse is over there. Let's go walk over towards that. And the sea was coming in, but we thought like, hey, like we can get there. And the sea was coming in pretty quick, so we ended up having to like start clambering over rocks. And was it Jack or was it me first? I think it was me first. So the water's coming in, and these are like dangerous now, where like people get locked in between two rocks. The waves will come crashing in, and like you get stuck. That's how people die. And we were on these rocks, and I was like, "Fuck!" Like we're in the middle here. So I was like, "Right, let's just try and get off this rock, and then go on to the next one." I slip, hit my head on the rock, and like my head's bleeding at this point. And I was in the water, and I was like, "Jack, stay up there, stay up there." And then Jack slips, he falls in with me as well. And like we were just there, and the waves are starting to like come in. They weren't like, you're not looking at like 6 foot swells or anything, but it was like still enough that like if you didn't know how to swim, you'd be really fucked. Blessed, like me and Jack had both swam up until like we were 12 at like swimming school, so you kind of know how to do it. And I remember like us swimming around, swimming around, swimming around, and us getting there around the point, and I was like, dude, like imagine if we didn't know how to swim. Like we would have actually been dead. Like we actually would have died. And like my head wasn't bleeding bad, but like I think a little bit more force, it would have been concussed or like fully split open, which is another kind of situation. And this was only like 13, 14 years old. And I thought like, wow, like I'm really not ready to die at this point. Like there's a lot that I still would like to achieve. And I think the lesson in that is that, and I actually have a number that I do, and I think this is really worth people doing as well, is take your age and times it by 365 and then minus that number away from 32,850, and that will give you the amount of days left until you're 90 years old. So, for example, mine is, and it's less than that because I'm almost 26 now. So last year I did this and it's 23,725 days until I'm 90. And most people die around the 75 mark. So that's also given me a bit of an urgency to make the most out of every single fucking day that I can and kind of live that day somewhat to the fullest. And I think if you can do that, it gives you a great orientation to start the thing that you want to do today.
yeah, yeah. And how would I have a question for you,
Yeah,
and
all good.
then then we can end it if you want. But how do you think that people gain the inspiration or the motivation to actually want to go and pursue their dreams, maybe their
Mm.
childhood dreams or whatever it would be? What is it that creates that urgency for them that they are going to die one day and they should go and live their life fully now?
Yeah, and this is a great conversation because I work within an environment where you have an aspect of sales, but sales is helping somebody make a decision as well. Because, like myself, I waited 8 months to make that decision with that coach to change my life. And that happened because I had a breakup, and like that's a transformational experience in that time anyway. And I think sometimes people have that happen where you have an extreme experience, but look at it as like you can make a decision now, or the universe will make a decision for you down the line. And usually the universe is less forgiving. So, for example, most people know that they shouldn't smoke regularly, but people still do. What's the universe's answer to that down the road? lung cancer. So that's not a great experience. So for you to get to that decision earlier than it would have been for the universe, it's asking the right questions like we did earlier. It's like, hey, what's the cost of you doing this 5 years from now? Like, what if you keep on doing the exact same things that you've been doing and you don't change anything that you're doing and you're 10 years down the line? Like, what's the impact that that could have on your kids? What's the impact that could have on your future family? What's the impact that that'll have on the future relationships that you have? Like, here's something that landed for me recently. And before the travel, transparency, like I had a real issue with casual sex, and I've had that for like a long time. And I was listening to a Jordan Peterson article, and he said like, hey, like if you're prepared to have casual sex, then cool, but realize that you're also going to be treated like a casual partner for the rest of your life. And like I was like oh my goodness, like I was like, right, we're stopping, we're not doing it again, I don't want to do it anymore, we're done like, and that genuinely cemented that in my mind. And I think sometimes things like that happen, where you have something and it really hits you in the chest, like that guy saying, if you don't like your life, fucking change it.
Yeah.
But I think you also have to be in the energy of wanting the change, and in order to get to that point, it's asking yourself the right question. So like, if you're not happy right now, what would make you happy, and how can you walk yourself towards that? But without the questions, you go nowhere.
Yeah. Incredible.
Casual
Absolutely.
sex one's the wild one,
Mic
right?
drops.
Jaro, it's been an absolute joy having you on here. I've absolutely loved connecting with you. Like, I mean, we got an opportunity to connect for like maybe a hot 45 minutes and getting changed in like a dirty changing room. So like, I appreciate you coming on here, bro.
That
I
was so
really
funny.
do.
It was pretty.
Oh,
Anyway,
bro.
memory. Yeah.
Memories for sure. But with that said, for everybody listening, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedules to come in here, listen to Jaro and a little bit of my wisdom. And if anything landed with you, please do share it out on your socials. Jaro, where's the best place to tag you and get at you if people want to connect and see what you've got?
Get me on Instagram at TravelWithJaro would probably be the best place. Yeah.
My guy, my guy,
Hit me
my
up.
guy. So for
Hit me.
anybody listening still, we really appreciate it. And just have a little bit of a think of like, who do you know? Like if there was something that came up in this episode that really landed with you, don't think about just you. Think about maybe your brother, your sisters, your family, your friends, like whoever that is, a work colleague you used to know who might have had something land within this episode, and just think about that, because ultimately it's not about me. It's not about Jaro. It's about getting these messages to people that really, really need it. And with that said, keep moving forwards. Keep being the awesome people that you are. Don't ever stop. We appreciate you, and we hope you have an awesome day.